Canada is a very nice place to invest your money. We are being told this time and time again. Our government won't hesitate to recommend to foreign countries and people to do this. One of the ways to find out if this is true is to look at something called a foreign direct investment. The Fraser Institute ended up making a study about this, and their portrait of Canada's FDI is something that I find quite interesting. The report is also tracking another kind of habit for this country, supporting industries using taxpayers' money. From the EV mandate to the video game industry, we are going to see how this is really affecting the FDI in this country and the way that foreigners may see Canada in the near future. And especially what happens when a government, either federal or provincial, is slowly running out of money. Then, what is happening? My name is Seb, and I welcome you all to the Canadian Wilbury. So all of this began a couple of weeks ago when I ended up listening to a fascinating Quebec City French-speaking radio station interview between a lady that used to be a political advisor to Stephen Harper, explaining to the listeners the importance of the FDI and the fact that the foreign money was leaving Canada more and more, and this ended up catching my attention. I'm like, what the hell is she talking about? And so I decided from that interview to start digging a little bit more into it, and I find a lot of information, but something that ended up catching my attention was this Fraser Institute document that I am showing with you, and this is the foreign direct investment inflows in Canada between 1990 and 2024. So the FDI, what we call the foreign direct investment, is a tool in economy that is used among a lot of others to try to evaluate the economical health of any given country. There's two kinds of FDI, the inward FDI and the outward FDI. The inward FDI is the amount of money that is getting in the country, and the outward is the amount of money that is leaving the country. So this document here is basically trying to study or explain the inflow of money in Canada when you compare it to the US and Australia. So there's always this comparative in there. So this is not a really long document, but I did ended up talking to GPT about this because I am extremely green. This is not a field that is mine, and so I don't really know exactly how to interpret all of this. So most of the information is from my own reading and understanding, but also I will rely heavily on GPT to explain this. And so basically what this report is telling us over 30 years or 35 years from 1990 to 2024 is that the Canada's FDI is still kind of good. Canada has a capacity to attract money into our country, perhaps a little bit more than the US and Australia starting 2020, so at the beginning of the pandemic. And most of that may be explained by the fact that since 2020 or 2021, Canada started to become really aggressive when it comes to green energy, and the EV mandate that was announced and paused now that Mark Carney ended up announcing this. But what you need to understand is that subsidies is the magic word in here, that the clean energy and EVs were basically taxpayers' money supporting industries. And so once the government is backing up industries like that with massive subsidies, then of course foreign countries are going to say, well, we may end up going to Canada. So there's a couple of things that this report is also saying, that there's a lot of jobs and hype that is being announced, but between what you are able to announce initially and what you're able to produce at the end, there seems to be some problems in there. And so this is basically what this document is saying. I started to look a little bit in deeper about the EV mandate, especially through the failure of Nordvolt, and this is exactly where we are going to go now. The Nordvolt file in the province of Quebec, that was supposed to be the biggest announcement in the history of the province. Nearly $3 billion was supposed to be invested or spent by Quebec, while Ottawa decided to chip another $4.5 billion into what was supposed to become the biggest battery manufacturer across the entire country. And we decided to spend billions of dollars in this, and some people ended up screaming, especially some environmentalists, because some laws were literally ignored in this. The province of Quebec ended up being sued, as this Global News article is saying, and basically corners ended up being cut. This had to work. This had to be accepted. This project was just too big to fail. The industry proclaimed this as being a transformative, the future of cars in both Quebec and Canada. No verification were made about the mother company, and the money was flying like there was no frickin' tomorrow. And yet, the master company was facing some serious problems, supply chain issues, a shift in demand for EVs, and the problem that Nordvolt in Sweden had to raise capital. But it didn't matter, really, since the province of Quebec and to a certain degree the government of Canada was so determined for this to succeed, because it's not their money, it's ours. And in the end, unfortunately, in 2025, what seems to be the biggest project in the history of the province ended up collapsing, and massive subsidies could not save this project. And so we, the taxpayers, ended up losing $500 million in this. Half of that money lost with Nordvolt Sweden. The other half we may be able to go and get back. I ended up doing a little video about this. I'll try and pin it here or there for those of you who are interested in seeing this. So my point is, this is not something that the market has decided. This is something that was pushed onward by the government, and the taxpayers' money was heavily pushed to try and artificially maintain this project alive. And so the question that I have, if there is no subsidies, is there a Nordvolt to begin with? Now, another good example of what the report is saying is that this is the video game industry, because this is another one that is being supported by a provincial government this time, and this is the province of Quebec, because the province is literally supporting employees' salaries who are based in their Montreal and Quebec cities offices. This is what we call a tax credit programs. This ended up having a magnificent success. As you can see here, La Belle Province is home to over 15,000 video game employees scattered all across the province into over 250 production studios, making the province the powerhouse hub for the industry in the country, a whopping $1.5 billion of the province GDP. But at what cost? Because if you are going to keep the video game industry happy in the province of Quebec, the price to pay for the taxpayers is supporting up to 38% of your labor's cost under certain precise condition. Fair enough, but still. And so what happened when the province of Quebec is starting to say that, you know what, maybe the time had come that perhaps we want to try and either change or reduce this taxation program? Some video game studios are getting extremely nervous, as you can see here, because those modifications to that tax program are supporting salaries, and just this little change is big enough to start rocking the boat of these studios in a serious fashion. This quote here is a magnificent example of what I am trying to say. In other words, some investors are literally dependent to that taxation program, and if the province is decided to leaving, you can imagine the dire consequences. Now, look, I understand industries don't like changes and they react very badly when the government is trying to change some of that, but when you have between 35 to 40% of the salaries that being supported by the government, and that very government cannot keep pushing money like this because their public finances are just going down the frickin' drain, then as a company in the video game industry, what are you going to do now? One of the reasons as to why the province of Quebec is probably thinking about changing this taxation program is because in early 2025, the province ended up losing its AA negative credit score to single A plus. And this ended up sending a clear message. Their public finances are not in order and they have a serious spending problems, hence the reason why the credit firm Moody's on Wall Street decided to lower the province credit score. And when you look at Canada as a whole, with record deficit that are expected for this fiscal year, our government is pressured to produce a budget to show the importance of that reality to everyone. Prime Minister Marc Carney is now saying that his new motto is spend less and invest more, because you see, investing is literally supporting Canadian companies artificially with our taxpayers' money, something that I call semantic bullshit, and I am going to tell you why, since the two words spending and investing are using the exact same money from our pockets. So it doesn't matter if you call it a spending or an investment, it's coming out of the same pocket. And this tendency of Marc Carney may only accelerate since this is where our country seems to be heading more and more. One of the greatest examples of this, September the 5th, Prime Minister Marc Carney ended up announcing a series of measures to try and protect Canada against the trade war that is currently going on with the USA. The creation of a strategic response fund that is aimed at supporting those very industries that are being hit by those UF tariffs. The auto industry, steel, lumber, and even the canola industry is going to be affected by this. This is a response that is worth over $5 billion, and this may end up being deployed into the next upcoming 3 years. Also giving access to millions of dollars in liquidity relief to Canadian small and medium enterprises just to keep them afloat. I ended up asking ChatGPT with the link that I'm going to that I share with you guys, is that how much money are we talking about here? Because there's like a couple of hundreds of millions of dollars here, there's a couple of billions of dollars there. According to GPT, what Marc Carney ended up announcing, or what was published into the website on the Prime Minister's website, this is getting close to $7 billion just to keep this country afloat. Money from the government is flying left and right. And all right, we need to protect ourselves from the US and their bad tariffs. Is that correct? And I'm like, okay, fair enough. Why don't we go and have a look? Here is the list of all the countries in the world that are affected by the US tariff. And as I am scrolling down, are you noticing the exact same thing as I do? Where is Canada on that list? Canada is not even showing on the list of countries that are being hit with tariffs. And Mexico is also absent. Clearly, Donald Trump is hitting Canada and Mexico with tariffs. Well, there is an explanation to this, and the Business Insider is giving us the answer. And the answer is because Canada and Mexico have a trade agreement with the US. Therefore, the US cannot slap Canada with all kinds of crazy tariff because you're going against the trade agreement that we ended up signing with the US. I hope that Canadians understand this. Yes, Canada is being hit with tariffs by America, but no, we are not into the worst position. Quite the opposite, actually. We are probably considered on the top of the world when it comes to US hitting Canada with tariffs. You got countries like Japan, Europe, Asia, all of them, 15, 17, 19% tariff on every single product they send to the US are being hit with tariff, and still they're running like crazy and they're signing a trade agreement with the US. So what is the government of Canada doing, and why don't we have one ourselves? Well, the Liberals are now preparing themselves for the 2025 fall budget, and the stakes are extremely high. As you can see here from BNN Bloomberg, and I am going to read you the very first line, not the big title, but the first line of that article, just to give you guys how serious the situation has now become in Canada. Open quote, major institutional investors are asking the federal government to give them a reason to invest more at home in the upcoming fall budget, end quote. When I say to you that the Fraser Institute ended up talking about this, that FDI and the Fraser Institute report, this is exactly the kind of bad signal that the report is saying. Without subsidies. Subsidies is exactly what Mark Carney ended up announcing on the September 5th. Canada's fundamentals aren't actually more attractive. This is what the report is saying. Oh, and by the way, our national debt ended up going up by a whopping $7 billion. Alright, so why the hell am I talking about all this, and how can we connect all those dots together? I am calling this the double whammy economy because, and let's begin with the EV mandate, all of us Canadians are paying for the factories. We're paying for the batteries. We're paying for the salary of these employees. I gave you the numbers. This is billions and billions of dollars from our tax money that we are giving to the government to artificially keep this thing alive. And we are doing so via our tax report every single year. And when we are being asked to buy a Nordvolt product or any kind of EV, both as a Quebecer and as a Canadian, we are expected to pay the full price. Do you see where I'm going with this? And it's not like you have a choice. The government of Canada ended up pausing its EV mandate, but the government of Quebec is going straight into it, meaning that if you are a Quebecer and you want to buy yourself an electrical car in 2026, you're gonna have to pay the full price of that car, even if you pay already by doing your tax report at the end of the year. At least if you could have a 35% rebate from Nordvolt or any of its product by showing a piece of ID claiming that you are in the province of Quebec, I would probably be a little bit more understandable and say, okay, you pay with your taxes at the end of the year, at least you're getting a rebate. This is exactly the same with the video game industry, as you are showing your driver's license or a piece of identity proving that you live in a province of Quebec. You should also get a lot of video games dirt cheap, but you're not. So that's the reason why I'm calling this a double whammy. Of course, the workers from the video game industries are contributing to the province of Quebec. I get this. I don't want anybody to lose their job. And I also understand that if you are within the middle of an economical crisis, that the government can step out and try helping all of these companies to stay afloat. But the example of Quebec is very potent. They ended up losing their credit score, meaning that it's getting harder and harder for them to borrow money. They're generating billions of dollars year after year after year. And now Moody's is looking at Quebec and saying, you are becoming more unworthy of loaning money, so we are going to raise your interest, so this is going to cost you more money to reimburse everything, and so the province has to intervene less and less and less into supporting all of these industries. And I believe when I'm looking at Mark Carney doing and explaining that this $7 billion September 5th announcement is based exclusively on Donald Trump, that this is exactly where Canada is going. And then when the government is running out of money, like the province of Quebec is about to do, and they're gonna have to start rethinking the way that they are intervening in their economy, then what do you do if your job really depend on it? Did you knew about that? But if you are going to subsidize everything, more and more people, and this is what the Bloomberg article is saying, the capacity that you have to not being able to control your public finances, you might end up scaring investors away instead of encouraging them to come to Canada. Guess we're gonna have to find out. 2025, the fall, the budget season, I should say, is going to be really interesting, because those major investors that are looking at the Liberals with their arm crossed and say, tell me why I should put my money into Canada, they're expecting answers. And I am afraid of their reactions when they are going to get them. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.